Thanks for coming and spending the end of your day here with me. I know I'm the only thing between you and getting out of here, but hopefully this will be a useful and interesting session. And I hope it'll be interactive and you'll participate in it as well. But for those of you who, I know most of you probably know who I am or at least have heard of me, but I write almost weekly for ERE. And I know many of you read those articles, but I wear a couple of other hats as well. I do a lot of internal consulting with clients on their recruiting strategy and process. And one of the areas that I really like to focus on is college recruiting. It's one of my pet areas of interest, and it's one of the areas that I think is the most archaic and the most out of date from most companies, the way they approach it. I also run a think tank called the Future of Talent Institute, which is the graphic up there, and we do research into recruiting trends and talent trends out 3 to 5 years. And so some of this is based on the research that we do around the recruiting trends that are coming up, especially with Gen Y or these people that are now in college, or even the ones younger that are going to be coming into college or just starting out in their freshman year. And obviously they're a lot different than I was when I was in college, all right? If I don't even remember it. So tell me, what are some of your issues? Anybody want to share? How many of you do college recruiting? Is that your primary focus? Okay. Some of you, but not everybody. Of those of you who do, does anybody, you have an issue, or how has it been going? Easy? Hard? You get the people you want?
Lately it's been easier.
It's been easier lately? Yeah. I mean, right now, given the economy, it's much easier than it was a couple of years ago. But that won't last very long. Anything else? Okay, I won't belabor because most of you aren't in college recruiting. But I mean, the issues that I see out there are a number. There's the number of grads in hard science areas, math, physics, engineering, are continuing to decline. And those are really the areas where, many organizations are focusing their recruiting. It's, quite honestly, never been too difficult to find good people in the liberal arts area to recruit, although that really depends on how you define a good candidate and what you're looking for. But clearly the demographics are not good. College enrollments are down. This year they're down pretty significantly. Most college students are girls, which is nothing wrong with that, but the majority, 2/3 of all students today are female, and the facts right now culturally just say that they don't enter the hard sciences, the math, or the other professions. So the number of people in those professions is shrinking even more. The number of people interested in going to college is declining as young people are finding other things that we'll talk about in order to fulfill themselves or to make themselves financially successful. And they may someday go back to school, but right now when they're 18, 19, and 20, they're choosing not to go, many of them. So, the whole idea of college recruiting is sort of changing in a conceptual way. There's a lot of people returning back to school in their 30s and 40s. I'm sure some of you may have gone back to school and done a graduate degree or further study, and who recruited you? And why wasn't anyone recruiting you? And so when you look at college recruiting, traditionally we look at it as those people who are, around, 20, early 20s is who we're after, and we really should have a very different perspective on that. I think we should be looking at people in their 30s, their 40s, people in almost any age group or bracket, and we also pretty much only recruit at what I call traditional brick and mortar universities. We pretty much only go to those places that have a campus, and yet increasingly the number of students that are studying virtually is skyrocketing. And nobody is really tapping that whole market. So there's a whole market of virtual students who are very smart, often experienced, and nobody really recruits those people. They end up having to go figure out how to get a job on their own. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that people in college recruiting just aren't looking at. And I think it's, driven by a lot of factors, but it's really primarily driven by old folks like me who run the corporations and say, we want people that went to my school, and we want people that went to my alma mater and that look like me, and I don't want you recruiting in any of these other places. Even though that's not what they actually say, that's really what the culture kind of enforces or makes happen. So if we look at the future out there, I think we've touched on almost all of these things, but it's also a global market. And this year, over 30% of college graduates in the U.S. are choosing to look for a job outside the United States. They don't want a job in the U.S. because they look at the U.S. as yesterday, backwards. And if you really want a future, you'd better spend some time in China or India or somewhere else and get that global experience under your belt and go work for a company that's going to give me Mandarin or some other language to speak so that I'm going to be really employable in the future. So why would I want to go work for an American company that's, stuck in their mind, unexciting place, doing some unexciting work for unexciting people? And we're going to talk about this whole mindset difference and the idea that in my era, and certainly in maybe many of your era, just getting that job was a big first step, and it didn't matter who, as long as it was a good company that had benefits and a career. And almost none of that is meaningful anymore. And now, I will say that what I'm saying is based on research, but I know anybody who does college recruiting can say, oh, I can find a whole bunch of people that meet my criteria. And it's like a bell curve. You can get anything you want on that curve. There's going to be very conservative college students who are pretty much like I was, or maybe like you were a long time ago. But the ones you probably really want, in my opinion, are moving away from you. And they're moving away from companies that are traditional for lots of reasons, partly generational. So I'm just going to show you a movie. Now, this was I teach part-time at San Francisco State University, and I had some students go down to Fisherman's Wharf and just interview people. So this is an interview. You'll see what it's about in a minute. But we've put up their age. So I want you to look at what they say and correlate that to their age on this video. So if you could go ahead and play that for me, please.
I hope to be a dentist.
Hopefully, I would like to be a dancer and a performer.
I haven't really given it much thought other than I just want to graduate within the next year and a half.
Future career will hopefully be using electrical engineering in conjunction with music and somehow.
I'm not really the working type. I'll work for a while and try to save as much money as possible, and then I'll probably live in a van.
I would like to be an author and go to New York and write a novel and just make like a whole lot of money off of that.
I envision it with a lot of kids around me. I'm not sure exactly what, but probably with learning disabled kids.
Most likely working for myself. Try to stay away from those big corporations.
Right now, I'm sort of oriented towards a career in biostatistics.
I envision myself growing in the organization. It is a very good organization which is loyal to its employees.
I hope to be able to extend my ideas and thoughts to the community as much as possible to better San Francisco, to better the country, the United States, and to better the whole world and the environment if possible.
I envision my future career as something that I'm happy doing and that I can do from home.
So, you notice any age differences and how they look at things? I think if you really look at this, you can really begin to see this. And we've got lots of other video. We've interviewed hundreds of people of different age groups around, career aspirations, work aspirations, and so forth. And, we're learning a whole lot of things about the young generation that's in school. And the bottom line, I think if I just had to sum it up, is they probably don't want to work for any of you. And what they really want to do, if they could really do anything they wanted to do, is mostly work for themselves or work with a couple of their friends. We also know that they want to do work that's different from the kind of work we're probably trying to sell to them. So let's just talk a little bit more about that. They got lots and lots of opportunities. They can work almost anywhere in the world if they're really motivated and clever at what they do. And those are the kind of people I would like to have working for me in an organization. I don't want them to just sit there on campus and wait for me to come and do an info session, and I might happen to drop by for the free cheese or beer. I want somebody who's passionate about what I'm doing and really wants to do it. And so if you look at what's going on campuses in terms of opportunity, not all of these opportunities are for money. And when we say so many college kids aren't employed, lots of them aren't employed by choice. There's never been more volunteering going on than right now. So if you look at the AmeriCorps and the Teacher Corps, they've never had more people applying for jobs. They've got so many, they're turning people away now. And people in the Peace Corps and other sorts of volunteer activities, whether it's church groups or Habitat for Humanity or whatever it is, or small nonprofit organizations. I look in San Francisco at a whole bunch of some of the students that I've worked with, and they are working for all sorts of like Zipcar and all these other sort of environmentally friendly, small, not very lucrative necessarily, they maybe make enough to live, kinds of opportunities. So they're looking at different things. Now, once again, sure, you can find enough of the more traditional students to meet the demands that you probably have this minute. But the question really is that going to hold true 3 years, 5 years from now? And what happens when the economy, which it will, rebound? What's going to happen then? And where are you going to be in terms of your positioning and your thinking about this generation and how you're going to attack them and get them to work for you? This whole meaningful work thing, I think you heard a couple people in there say they want to work with disabled kids, or I want something that will change the community. This is their focus. They're really not interested in making a lot of money for you. And that, I think, is the real fundamental difference. They're coming up to, I know certainly to me and others, and saying, what kind of work do you have that will make a difference to the world, to people? I just don't want to do something that's pointless. I don't want to just, sit in an office and spin my wheels doing something that I'm not even sure why I'm doing it or where it's going to lead to or what the point of it is. So how do I get more involved and have work that's more meaningful? And they want fun. So if you look at a place like a Google or a Facebook or whatever it is, the environment there is very different than, let's just say, a lot of traditional companies. You don't have to dress up very much at all. You can wear pretty much anything you want. They have all sorts of activities going on. In many of these companies, you can bring your pets or whatever you want. You can ride your bicycle in. You can bring it into your cubicle with you. You can do stuff that in a traditional company you can't do. And that's kind of what they're looking for. Is this company going to have an environment that is interesting and fun and challenging and doesn't give me all these sort of artificial constraints on how I should dress and act and be? And we could really talk that whole piece out quite a lot, especially around the privacy issue and the social networks, and maybe we'll touch on that in a little bit here. But they see things very differently than Gen X and very differently than the baby boomers. And, they're really looking, they're first of all, let's just go through what they are. They're very confident and optimistic. This is not a depressed generation. This is not a cynical generation, which Gen X was. So if you're in your 40s or late 30s or 40s, you're probably Gen X, and it's a pretty cynical generation. I hate to say that, but that's what all our research shows. And the bottom line is they kind of look at the glass as half empty. And, I've been shafted, and the whole idea is I better take care of myself and earn as much money as I can, and I'm looking after number one. And I'm going to look out for my family, and I don't really care who I work for as long as they pay me a lot of money. I don't really care what I do as long as I get a lot of money, because meaning in my life is outside of work. This generation is totally opposite. They want to work where it's really meaningful, where they're doing good stuff. They're very optimistic, confident, happy about the future. So a really different mindset about things. They're not depressed about this depression, this recession. You ask them how they are, and they're pretty much okay with it. Hey, these things happen, Hey, I'll figure out how to get through it. Whether it's living at home with my folks, whether it's moving in with 3 other people, we'll weather through it. So it's not like, oh my God, the world's ending. And they're looking at China and India, and they're saying, hey, there's a lot of opportunities other places, so why don't I go look at those places? That's a really kind of different space. Their only real issue is they get college loans to pay back in some cases. And if they didn't have college loans, it would even change this picture more dramatically than it has. And some of them may have to work for you for a couple of years just to pay back those loans, but I don't think they're going to stay there for very long. Right? So you've got a very civic-minded group. They want to work for the community. And community is a really important part of their life. Google has this thing where you can give so many hours a week or a month back to your community and get paid for it at work. They donate, basically they donate your time so you can go work for a charitable organization on company pay. and that's okay. And they give you a certain amount of time to do that. So a lot of companies are figuring this out and offering them incentives that tie into that spirit. We've already talked about this right-sizing their lives. You know, I don't have to live in a big house. I'm not going to get a mortgage. I think you're going to see this generation being renters, not owners, of almost everything. They're going to rent cars. They're going to go get a zip car when they need one. If they buy a car, it'll be a used car because the carbon is already out there in the air. They don't have to, buy a new car, which puts a lot of carbon in the air just to make it. They're very energy conscious, thinking about these kind of things. If you drive a 1960s or 70s car, any damage to the environment that car created has already been done. And if you're buying a new car, they're using up all kinds of resources and energy to make that new car. So a very different attitude about life and about things. So if you're a company that makes a lot of new stuff or is involved in that, that's not necessarily a positive thing. They'd rather have a company involved in services or creative things or community work. So it kind of depends on what your company does as to where you fit. We've already talked about the global mindset. So fundamentally, a very different generation than probably you were, and certainly totally different than I was, for sure, coming out of school. So these are kind of things they're motivated by. I'm not going to read these to you. You can all read that. But I am going to point out those three in the middle are really important concepts. Okay? This whole idea of getting paid fairly for what they do. This is a big chunk of their life. This is why they want to be entrepreneurs. Why should I work for this company where this old fart who's been here 30 years and doesn't do anything that I can perceive gets 4 times more money than I do, and I do all the work? Okay? That's exactly how they look about it. Okay? So they're saying, I just don't want to be involved in that. It's just ridiculous. I'm not going to live here for the next 20 years just so I can get up to that height. The title doesn't turn me on. Power doesn't turn me on. It's just not motivators for me. And so when we go in and say you have a great career path and 20 years you can be a VP, that's like turning them off, not on. Okay? That's like negative kind of language to most of these young people. Okay? They really want to work as a team. And think about how we've educated these young kids. If you have children, think about how they're being schooled right now. They're not sitting in rows like this. They're not sitting in alphabetized kinds of situations. They're probably sitting around little tables, working as a team, doing group projects. The teacher's role is not an authority figure who's lecturing on the blackboard. The teacher is Kevin, and Kevin is my coach and my guide. He's not Mr. Wheeler, who cracks a big ruler. A very different concept of what a teacher is all about. Well, they come to work, or you try to recruit them into traditional environments where there's a boss who's an authority figure. You've got to work all by yourself in a cube. You're personally accountable for this and that kind of thing. And they're saying, I thought it was going to be a team environment. I thought we were going to have group projects. I thought we were going to work on things where we all get rewarded and take responsibility. So once again, how do you motivate and recruit people who that's kind of their mindset? And, we kind of have this old shell that we're trying to put this new thing into, and it doesn't fit very well. And it's fitting less and less well every day. And again, if you look at the Facebook or Google, it's much more of team environment, much more group projects, much more group incentives. And this generation is okay with that. My generation and your generations would kill because I want to get my bonus. And I don't want to share this with 4 other people. And this is not my way of looking at things. Okay? So really different concepts. Okay? And they want to constantly be learning and having new opportunities. And I'm going to stress this, not a career in the traditional sense of the word. They don't want a ladder to climb. They want opportunities to explore. So if they come in as an engineer, 2 years later they might be in HR. They might be in finance. They don't want to necessarily spend 20 years in some discipline climbing up a ladder. Not what they want. And they expect that you'll give them the opportunity and the training to make that happen. And if you don't, they will leave very quickly. Okay? This is a good article. There's a link at the bottom, a hypertext link. You might want to look this up. She calls them millennial magnets, which are the Gen Y young people. and what their best practices. This personal touch recruiting is really important, and I kind of bolded that for you. But it's they expect to recruit it as an individual. They expect that you will get to know who they are personally, that you will talk to them on a one-on-one basis, not the group or this whole anonymous bunch of people that you're trying to recruit. But I am Kevin, and I want to be recruited for my unique characteristics and my unique ability to contribute to the organization, not for some, anonymous sort of, we treat all college recruits like this. That doesn't go over very well, okay? So you really need to look at your whole social media strategies, your communication strategies, your methods of reaching out to them. It all has to become very different and much more interactive than it is. Group socializing. We've already talked a lot about this. While I want to be recruited as an individual, I also want to be part of a team, and I want you to recognize the value to me of being connected to that group and that team. And, I know there was a company in the Silicon Valley who about 4 or 5 years ago figured this out. They went to Santa Clara University, and they were having a very hard time recruiting electrical engineers. So they went to Santa Clara University, they went to the graduating class, and they offered every single one of them a job, irregardless of GPA, anything ever, or never even interviewed them. They just said, everybody in this room has an offer. And here's your offer to come to work for us. And they used the power of social networking, because the 3 or 4 who were holdouts, there was one caveat. They all had to come work. If they didn't all say yes, then they each had to go through an individual process. But if they all came en masse as a group, they would hire them all. And so can you imagine the pressure from the social network and the team? It worked because they all accepted, and they all got hired. Okay? So, and it worked very well. It was written up in a lot of stories and a lot of articles about this. Very novel approach. And then the dot-com bust happened, and the company didn't do very well. But it wasn't because of that. It was other things. But a very innovative and creative way to recruit. And a very different group team approach to recruiting. And really, they kind of subtly use social networking, in effect, to get these people to say yes and come into the organization. I think you can do a lot with that. And I'm going to leave the rest up there. I think we've covered most of those. So what they don't want, they don't want a traditional career. I think that's a big mistake I see many of the largest and most traditional companies making. We confuse opportunity with career. And I make a distinction, meaning a career is a ladder in a professional track. And if you're expected to come in as a junior electrical engineer and end your career in engineering, that's probably, for some, that may be exactly what they want. But for many, they want an opportunity to at least explore other areas in the company. They want that opportunity to be able to test out HR or test out some other part of the company. And I work with so many organizations where they're actually starting to do that. And it's very refreshing when, you see somebody coming in as let's just say as an engineer, and 2 years later they're in training and development, or they're an HR generalist. And the company's giving them a mentor and giving them the training to make that happen. And that's a huge hiring incentive if your organization can put that structure into place. Okay? Not really probably looking for permanent employment in the sense of, the expectation is you'll be here forever. They really would much rather have you tell them, look, come in here, spend a couple years. If it's not for you, move on. We're happy to stay in touch. We'll put you on our social network. We'll bring you back maybe later if you want to come back. But if you sort of give them that permission up front, that it's okay to look at this as a couple of years, 3 or 4 year job. And, again, this is probably the hardest thing to sell to people my age, because, damn it, if I'm going to train you for 2 years and then you're going to leave and go work for somebody else, they're going to get the benefit of all of our training. And it's true, but that's the way the world goes. You're going to get the benefit of somebody else's 2 years of training because you're going to hire somebody else in. So I just look at it as I'm going to trade my 2 years for your 2 years. And if you think of it in a positive way, you're getting competitive intelligence, you're getting diversity, you're getting a lot of different things from hiring people that may have left some other company and letting some of your people go and then bring them back a few years later. So it's kind of a lesson learned, I think, the hard way in Silicon Valley over the years, not just with college hires, but with anybody, that letting people go and then hiring them back later is actually a good thing, not a negative thing, because you gain that sort of expanded experience and wisdom that they have from that process. So, loosening things up, giving people permission, letting it be a much more go with the flow kind of a process. Very hard for structured companies and baby boomers to deal with, but really the most successful way to go about college recruiting. So if you look at some of these sites, the U.S. Army, I use this one. If you want to look at how somebody's doing some really good attraction strategies, look at the U.S. Army. And I use this as a great example because if you remember a few years ago, what was the Army slogan? Anybody remember? Be all you can be. That was around for probably 20 years. And maybe one of the best known recruiting slogans in the United States. Be all you can be. What is it today? An army of one. Why is that? Why an army of one? Isn't be all you can be better? And, I said that when I first heard that, and I thought it was really ridiculous. An army of one. And the bottom line is, I want to have choice. I want to be able to have an individual career path. I want to be able to choose what I do, but I want to be part of a team, what I told you a little while ago around this whole thing. But I also want to be part of an organization and a team that I think is doing good things. So an army of one means, and they put this into practice in all their HR and recruiting practices, you can actually sign up and be guaranteed a certain kind of training and opportunity in the Army. So you can sign up to be a mechanic, and they will guarantee you that you will study to be a mechanic. Whereas in the old days of the Army, you got hired in as, you wanted to be a cook, and you ended up as a tank driver. You had no choice. They just sort of assigned you at random. Today, you can actually choose that. So the whole point of an army of one is very, very powerful, has resonated extremely well. And even in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Army has met all of its recruiting requirements. It's really pretty amazing. They've met them all. And how many of you have met all your recruiting requirements? And I think a lot of corporations have not been able to do that with much ease. And they've done this without a whole lot of effort. But they've built an interactive website that uses media, that uses graphics, that uses games and simulations. They went out and got a message that appeals to these people. They studied their market, and they know who they're after. And this would not appeal to 30 years old or 40-year-old people necessarily. It doesn't necessarily appeal to whole groups of people in society, but they're not recruiting those groups. So this is targeted to, and they studied very carefully, the group of people that's most likely to join the Army. And 17 to 18-year-old, mostly guys, but also girls, with a certain sort of mindset and an attitude, and they studied very carefully what message works for them and how to make it work. And it's been, obviously, very, very successful. Okay? Most of us don't do that. We assume that the world is pretty much the way it was when we went to school. They want to hear the same things that we want to hear, and we go out there, and then we find out that we're not really getting the people we wish we were getting. And, in fact, you don't even know what you didn't get. And this is the other thing. It's like you don't know what you didn't get. And I think that's the real sadness about a lot of college recruiting, is you think you're getting the best, but you have no idea who never showed up. You have no idea who didn't even come near you. You have no idea who had a job or figured out what they were going to do way before you ever came on campus. And therefore, you don't even know they exist. So you're only looking at a subset of the total population. Even no matter what you do, that's what you're looking at. So we look at current college programs. I think they're pretty much all based on non-quantitative criteria. Some schools are better. We only go to 4 great schools. And, I say, why do you pick those 4 schools? Because their CEO went there, the CFO went there, the head of engineering went there, and we just happen to like this one because it's next door. Okay? There's no real quantitative proof that the students from that school are better than the students from that school. And understandably, given the way the world was in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, I can understand why you had to pick 4 or 5 physical locations and go there. You don't have to do that anymore. But we hang on to that with some, as if it had some reverence or something, you know? So why, when you can virtually go anywhere in the world, would you limit yourself to 4 or 5 schools? And I don't understand that, you know? And you're not recruiting a school, for crying out loud. You're recruiting skills and competencies and attitude. And that can exist anywhere. So why limit yourself to 4 or 5 schools? There is no quantitative proof that, you know, one school is better than another school. And I can show you data till you choke that there's no statistical difference between students who graduate from one school and another a couple of years into their job, right? If they have the right skills and the right attitude to fit your company. Yeah? Do the hiring managers really care? No, probably not. But I wouldn't show them the data. I would just bring them lots of really good students, okay? And I wouldn't necessarily tell them where they came from. I mean, they'll find out, obviously, when they read the resume. But when they say, why did you bring me this guy from this school? I'll say, because they're so fantastic. They've got this skill set. They've got this competency. They've got this attitude. They've done this particular thing. I don't think it's that hard to sell this stuff. I've sold it. I know you can do it. It's a matter of, you know, they've got a paradigm, your hiring managers. You know, I want only people who went to, you know, I don't know, MIT. Okay, that's all I want. All right. If you can show, boy, a really fantastic student that went to some other school, I've never seen a manager say, I won't talk to that person at all. All right. That doesn't happen. It just, you don't ever bring them to them because we just say yes, sir, and go do what we're told. And you know, I think you need to be a little bit more creative and try to be a little bit more influencing in this, and use your own intelligence about where you think this skill might be. But I think you really have to have a different idea. You can't go on the alumni. The alumni were yesterday. The alumni are ancient crones sometimes, all right? And the alumni say, oh, I think, oh, this school's the best school. Well, maybe it was for whatever they did, but it may not be anymore. You know, what are you looking for? What are you trying to recruit people to do? And what school or area or field is going to provide that for you in the highest quantity? So it's not, I don't try to say just go do it to be different. I say do it because it's more successful. It's going to, you can prove over time quantitatively that that was a better approach than this traditional approach. Okay? That's really the bottom line. You know, going to campus, I love this one. I really don't know why we go to campus. I have no clue. How many of you have done college campus recruiting? Okay. And, you know, you go to a campus once, twice, 3 times in a semester or a year. Okay. If you're really lucky, you see like a handful of people. Right? Maybe you have an info session. You know, I used to do college recruiting. I used to sit there and the info, I might have this many people in the room. I ask them, how many of you are, I'm looking for, you know, people that want to be semiconductor engineers. So how many of you are engineering students? You know, 6 people raise their hand. The other 20 or 30 are there for the free beer and cheese or whatever it is, okay? They really have no interest in engineering. They're looking at, don't you have some other careers like in HR or something? Not really, that's not what we're hiring for. You know, it's a tremendous expense and a tremendous amount of time and energy, and you probably brought 3 or 4 hiring managers along, and you take out the Electrical Engineering Society for dinner that night, and you know, there's no real significant commitment on any of those students' part to you. They don't really know anything about you or the company. And if you're lucky, you'll reach a dozen or 2 people in that campus. And let's say you go to 4 or 5, 6 campuses in a year, hundreds of thousands of dollars in travel costs and lodging costs and dinner and food to maybe reap 6 or 8 students. The ROI on that is pretty pathetic. And if you went into anybody in the world and said, here's the cost per hire, here's the ROI on that, they would fire you instantly. Right? But we do it every year, over and over, and we budget tons of money. And I know why. College hiring managers love to go back to their alumni. They love to walk around campus and as a big man on campus. It's a good ego trip. We all like to travel and go places and get out of our routine. It's very appealing, but it's not cost effective. And it's not even effective from a getting the best people perspective. Because if you had a virtual, good social networking strategy, think of how many great people you could reach on campuses that you will never go to and could never afford to go to, who would potentially love to work for your company and have that passion and skill set that you're looking for that maybe isn't at that other school. I used to beat my head recruiting at schools where I knew that the company that I worked for's reputation in that campus was not good. But we wanted graduates from that school. And so, we would literally beat our heads into pulp to get a graduate from that school. When there were kids in a school just a little bit away that were just as good and just as educated, who would love to work for us, and we didn't go there. And you sit there and say, what is the logic of this? What is this? It's the power of brand, that's for sure, the university brand. No question about that. But, we're not, I try to tell the hiring managers, you're not hiring brand, you're hiring skill, you're hiring performance, you're hiring attitude. And what do you want? Do you want just to be able to say you've got people from this school? Or do you want to be able to say we've got great engineers, we've got great talent that can do certain things better than anybody else? What do you really want out of your workforce? So, this is a real important thing to think about. And remember that most students, as I said earlier, don't want to work for you at all. So it's a lot more difficult than it was 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 5 years ago to recruit. Because increasingly they would rather go give it a shot on their own, try something out themselves, go work for a small startup somewhere, go somewhere where there's lots of opportunity, maybe I can make some money, maybe I can do more good for the world, but I really just don't want to commit myself to a big organization. I think most mornings are pretty boring and ineffective. I look at college recruiting websites all the time. I reviewed a whole bunch as I put this presentation together. I go to sleep. I've never seen anything so boring. And we offer you a lovely long-term career, blah, 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 blah. You can do this and that. That doesn't connect. I sit students down, I say, look at this. That's my son who's 27 now. Look at this. He spends 4 nanoseconds and says, yeah? I say, well, you interested? Are you kidding me? Yeah, just take some and sit them down in front of it. Get some young people and have them look at it. Anybody who's designing a software product or a physical product has users test the product. We don't have anybody test our college recruiting site. So the PR department or somebody puts together a site that's politically correct and not very effective. So I think there's 10 steps that I like to look at for a good college recruiting program. It's going to require some real mind-warping rethinking of how we do college recruiting. But first of all, you've got to know who you want. And that's in the center of this whole thing. Know who you want. And I don't mean just, I want engineers. First of all, you need to get it that narrow. You need to get it down to one particular type of function that you mostly are going after in this school or market. I don't think you can say we're recruiting for engineers, HR, finance, MBAs. To me, those are all separate projects. Okay? Each of those is a separate thing. What is the core thing that you're trying to go after? Focus is what I'm talking about here. What's your focus? Then, what are the skills for success for people like that in your company? What do you have to have for skills to be successful? And I don't mean just technical skills. I mean cultural skills, personality skills. What does it take to be successful in your company? And then you've got to really look at your brand and your strategy. How are you going to go after this particular segment? What's going to be, where are these people? What's the best approach to these people? Have you found a few of them and interviewed them and talked to them and really gotten a sense of what attracts them and what is going to bring them in? And there are groups of people that I can think of that probably a lot of things that I've said so far don't apply to. And very conservative, maybe grad students of some type, that might need a different strategy. I'm just talking generally, I'm saying in broad sense, what I'm talking about is where we need to be. But you need to really understand who you're after, what the best strategy is going to be to attract those people, and what your brand messaging has to be. Is it an army of one? Or is it be all you can be? Which one of those is going to resonate better? What's your brand message? If some student walked up to you and said, so why should I work for you? What are you going to say? This is the difficult thing, all right? This is the challenge. Then I think you need to really look at your marketing and CRM strategy. Once you know what you want your brand to be, how are you going to market and how are you going to build relationships with candidates? How are you going to do that? And this is not an info session twice a semester. That's no relationship. That's nothing. That's a waste of time. Right? So what is really going to create a reputation? Why does a student want to come and work for you? Why do they say yes? How can you influence that decision? What can you do to get them to do that? Increasingly, that means you're going to have to move over to interaction, which means you're going to have to find products and services that are truly engaging, interactive, and do two things. Treat them as individuals and treat them as that group and that team. And you've got to have a great and interactive website. But the website is actually minor. And if I had to trade anything, I would trade the website for the other stuff. What you really need is a social media strategy. There's a lot of companies here that have products and tools that can help you in that area. But you've really got to say, is it Facebook that's going to be the source for these students? If you have a Facebook page, how are you going to use that? How are you going to... You can't just stick up a Facebook page and leave it. You're going to have a community manager, somebody who can actually manage the site and drive this interactions for you. You're going to have to really think about this whole social networking strategy and increasingly move all this stuff onto mobile platforms, because most of these young people are on smartphones and they don't even hardly log onto a computer. And if they're doing Twitter or anything, they're going to be doing it on their phone. So if you've got a mobile strategy around this, because that's how you're going to have to really get to these people and interact with them. So this whole piece is just essential. Then an assessment process, and they want to be assessed. They don't want to be just treated like everybody else. They want you to assess them in a meaningful way. That doesn't mean they want to take 5 hours of tests, but there's all sorts of simulations and online games, other things that assess your skills. And I was just looking at the best one I've ever seen in my life from the Secret Service in England, MI 1 and 5 and 6. And they have a career site that you can't find. Honestly, they do this very deliberately. You have to be a sleuth to find it. Once you find it, it says, will you be the next 007? And you have to play a game, which is very, very serious simulation, having to solve various issues and code breaking and all sorts of stuff to see if you have the general skills to become a member of the Secret Service of the UK. And if you do, you're virtually guaranteed an interview. If you find it fun, exciting, you only find out about it by word of mouth, because the secret site, you can't get in there. So you got to ask somebody, how do you get into this site? Work your network. So it shows how good a spy you are, or sleuth, to even find the site, and then you go take this test. So I'm not saying that that's what you guys have to do, but that's the idea, to make it challenging, to make it difficult, but to make it fun at the same time. And that's the assessments that we're talking about here. So I think you're going to see a lot more in the whole simulation area, and little video games or scenarios where you have to answer questions. And some of these can be very easy and simple to put together, like a simple scenario with a video and then multiple choice questions. You don't have to spend a ton of money on that. Or you can move into something like the Secret Service of the UK. But those are two ends of a spectrum, and anywhere along there is where you can effectively play. But the whole idea is these kids live in a world of gaming, of multimedia, of YouTube. They don't even use Google for a search engine. They use YouTube for a search engine. The number one search engine at college today is YouTube. So, they're looking for visual and video everything. And you're giving them blocks of text and lots of stuff to read, and for God forbid, email, which is like grandpa's medium. Right? And we don't use that. We use instant messaging, we use Twitter, we use Facebook, but we rarely, if ever, use email. And I don't know if any of you have teenage kids or no teenage kids or college-age kids, but depending on where they are in the age spectrum, many of them are not even accessing email at all, except for quote-unquote official boring correspondence, okay? Like stuff from school or whatever. But my teacher might send me an email, but none of the people I really care about or engage with would ever send me an email. Right? And I know with my own kids, I have to text them if I ever want to get any response. Okay? They don't answer the phone. They don't read me email. A month later, he'll say, Dad, did you send me an email? I said, yeah, 2 months ago. He just looked at his email. Right? So you've really got to think about that. Connection. They don't necessarily want to be sold, or nor will they be sold by you. They want to be sold by hiring managers and their peers. So you need to figure out ways to connect them to other people in the company that do what they do. Give them access to other employees in the organization. Let them ask them, because they're going to do it anyways. So you might as well open the door up and just say, ask these guys what they think about working here. What's it like to work here? You can have an asynchronous chat room. You can have real-time chats. You can schedule you can actually formally schedule times to chat, although I wouldn't highly recommend that, but you can do that. There's all sorts of ways that you can get them to engage with the people they really are going to believe. They know you're selling them. They know that. It's like the car salesman, and the consumer's report is going to be the hiring managers and the peers that they get to talk to. So, they're going to really verify whatever you're trying to sell them on through these other sources that they consider a lot more objective. Okay? So, those are kind of the basic steps that you have to go through. Oh, I'm sorry, I have one more. The whole process piece. Another part that's horrendous in my experience around college recruiting. How quickly does it take you to make a decision? When do you make a decision? How much agony are you going to put me through to make that decision? Is it going to be 9 or 10 interviews and, months of waiting? And while I'm stacking up this offer, waiting for that offer to come in? Or do you do what that company did at Santa Clara University and just hire them right in the spot? And just say, yeah, you're good enough, you're hired, you got an offer. I mean, back in the old days of 4 or 5 years ago, I think some of those, I guess I'd call them showcase sort of recruiting methods. Microsoft was famous for busing you in and putting you through, hell for 2 days and writing obscure formulas on the whiteboard and kind of to intimidate and scare you and then making an offer. I don't think that works anymore. They don't really care about that. They're not that interested in working for you to go through that. So you're going to have to make it a much quicker and easier process. And I would actually say you should hire them in their sophomore year or junior year in school. You've got to figure out how can I get to these kids younger, sooner, because the competition is going to be in there getting them. So if I can get a student engaged in their freshman or sophomore year, even if they don't even know for sure if they want to be an engineer, but I think they're a good cultural fit for our company and have good skills, I can steer them. How many kids do I have come to me when I'm teaching saying, I'm studying business, but I really wished I was an engineer, but I didn't know. I didn't know there were opportunities. I didn't even understand that until last year. And then I figured out what I'd have to do to become an engineer. And I can't go back to school for 3 more years. So if you'd only gotten there sooner, you could have had a lot more people. But because we wait until we let them figure out what they want to be, they're looking to be coached and mentored. And you guys can be their coach and mentor in their freshman year. And I would say even high school. I usually try to say there's a 25-year recruiting continuum. It starts in kindergarten. I'm not kidding. Or maybe like Intel and others sponsor things like science fairs and career fairs and start getting kids interested in science and technology. And then you continuously touch points with them throughout their school career. So by the time they're in college, they love you. And they've already heard about you, and they've heard about engineering for years, and they don't even think about anything else. So, that to me is the ultimate brand. That's the ultimate recruiting strategy. Start as young as you possibly can, as long as you possibly can, and leverage social media to do it. So I'm going to skip over this. So, these are just kind of what I've already talked about. I'm not going to we're almost out of time, and I want to just finish up here. But you've got this in the PowerPoint that you've got. I think this is, we're not going to do this, but this is what you should do. You should write a sentence that answers the question is, why my organization? Why should I consider a position here instead of with whoever your competitor is? And how would you answer that in a very compelling, exciting way that would be hard for me to counteract? And if you can't answer that question, you need to really sit down and think about it. What is your unique difference? How are you better than whoever else might want the same person? It's no different than why should I buy this product instead of that product? You've got to have a clear reason why and what differentiates you. This is probably the hardest part of it all, is knowing who you really want and what that core message is that's going to resonate with that person and really get them to commit to you. So I really recommend you think about that. You've got to be very specific, very precise, very narrow in what you write. You can't just say it's a great place to work. That's not going to do it. All right? Everybody says they're a great place to work. What differentiates you from everybody else? And why should I spend even the next 2 years or 1 year working for you? Obviously, we've talked a lot about this. This whole interaction piece is huge. More and more, if you're not interacting on a regular basis, and by regular, I mean maybe weekly, for sure at least several times a month, you need to interact with any candidate you're even slightly interested in hiring. Because if you don't, in their mind, you don't exist anymore, and you're not interested in them. And every time they're neglected or left out, bottom line is the only reason they're going to come to work for you is because they're desperate for a job. And, we get lots of people who get hired every year who only reason they're coming to work for you is because you're desperate for the job, they got to pay back that student loan, and how this is better than nothing. It's not because, and they're as good as you are at pretending how passionate and excited they are and how they've dreamed their whole life of working for you. Okay? But when I talk to them, I get a really different story. Okay? So you've got to really understand what is turning them on, and are they really passionate about your company. I think, again, Facebook, U.S. Army Facebook page, build a very engaging Facebook page. They have recruiters locally that subcategorize these kids out. Like you're in San Francisco, they'll respond to you based on your geography. So you need to have a Facebook page. You probably need to do stuff on YouTube. Like I said, YouTube is critical. You'd have a bunch of videos up on YouTube about what you are, why you are, people talking to you. Again, as I said, their primary search engine is YouTube. And the first thing they're going to do if they hear about your company is probably go to YouTube and type in the name of your company. And if they see some, old coot like me wearing a suit and tie talking about how great it is to work here, you might as well forget it right there. Right? So you need to have something that's much more engaging and much more exciting than that. You can use a whole bunch of tools, collaboration tools, online tools. Socialcast is a micro-blogging tool. It's kind of like Yammer, if you're familiar with Yammer, which is sort of an internal Twitter. It allows you to do a little bit more extensive than 140 characters. You can actually have online chats and conversations. You can have a project up here. One of the things I think that we're missing with these young people, they love to work on solving a problem or an issue. Put an issue up here. We're trying to put in place a new, let's just say you're trying to recruit HR people, and you say we're trying to put in a new compensation program that will not be based on title or whatever it is. And let them work as a project and submit their answers and have sort of interactive conversation. So you can be saying, who are the really sharp kids that have great ideas here? Microsoft has this thing called a Channel 9, which is for very, very techie operations systems, core level programmers. I can't understand anything on the site. It's just total gibberish, all right? But basically, the recruiters lurk on this site, and they watch as people come in. They come in there for technical problems, like we have a kernel error in section 23. What do we do about it? And the Microsoft guys are talking back and forth, and the recruiters are saying, "Man, this guy is really sharp." And then you have to register to be part of the site. So they have your email. They can reach out and say, "Would you be interested in working at Microsoft?" This is a person that came there for technical support, has not even looking for a job. But by doing this, they can attract this kind of person. So you need to begin to find these more subtle, I call them organic ways of finding people who are there because they want to be, that are engaged in your company and its products already, that already like you because they wouldn't be there if they didn't, or maybe they hate you because they got a problem. But anyway, they're engaged with you. And now your point is, how can I convert them over to be a recruit, rather than going after a totally cold prospect who doesn't even know who you are. So that's kind of you've got to be creative in this whole space. It's a whole new world. And then there's one that, SimplyBox, another one that allows sort of enterprise communication solutions, but they all have external versions that work outside as well as inside the firewall. And you can include a lot of your college hires into this environment and get them involved. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. If you're familiar with Gartner, and they analyze technology, and they talk about their hype cycle, and microblogging and activity streams that I've circled are both very high up there. Activity streams are things like Socialcast, where you can have a long-going activity and discuss those things. They're also a type of microblogging like Yammer. These sites are all moving very quickly up into this plateau of productivity where they'll be very, very common. You can have a blog site. You can have various people in your company writing blogs. There's so many things you can do to have a branding presence that is interactive and engaging to these students. And you can just about take all the money you spend on campus recruiting and put it into this, and you'll be very, very successful. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. We already talked about it. You can read this over. Okay. I'm just going to go back here. There's a lot of CRM tools that allow you to communicate with candidates. Avature is designed specifically for recruiting. Any of you use Avature or have heard of it? Okay. It's a tool that's designed just for recruiting candidate relationship management. It allows you to do all kinds of interactive communication. There's also Kachinko. Kachinko is another platform based down in Houston that allows for social texting, for online communities. All of these tools are useful, tremendously useful, not only for college recruiting, but for any kind of recruiting. But certainly for college recruiting, because that's the age group that's probably the most likely to engage in using these tools. I'm not going to play this video, just an idea of a good recruiting video. I think you can go to lots of different websites and see great recruiting videos. A couple of companies that I think do a reasonably good job in college recruiting because they've been forced to, because it's all they recruit are college kids, are the big four. So if you look at KPMG or Deloitte or any of those, they do a really better than average job of creating an engaging and informative, interactive environment for college kids, because that's pretty much all they recruit, and it's their lifeblood. So they're really very good at that. So you can learn from those guys how to do it better. Gamify your social network. We're learning a whole lot about why people come back to your website, why they engage in your social network. And it's all being learned. There's a merger right now today of gaming and social networking. And the reason that that's merging together is what works in games works in social networking as well. So in other words, if you come to my site 3 times, you're going to get a badge. Any of you use Foursquare? Foursquare is a location software on your smartphone. Every time you go somewhere, you punch in that you're there. And after you've been there so many times, if you've been there more than anybody else, you become the mayor of that place. And they put your picture on the page. But every time you go there, if you go there like 4 or 5 times, you get a badge. 3 times, you're an explorer. 4 times, you're an adventurer. So you can use this. It sounds really hokey, but this is exactly what works, especially with this generation. Right? So you can go in there and give them, rewards like a badge, like a merit badge. You can give them recognition when they contribute a comment to your website. You can give them an old attaboy or attagirl, okay? You can give them a smiley face, send them back a little personal message, goes back. Thanks for your comments. Really hope you continue to do this, okay? You can do a progress bar. You can look across the bottom and say, you can give them a little contest, or you can give something and then show where they are in this. You kind of show them how they're progressing. You can put a progress bar on for how they're doing in the recruiting process. Where are you in the process? Well, you just started the process. You're an explorer and coming to work for our company. Now after you've been on our website, you've been on our social network, you've made a few comments. Now you've moved up to seasoned adventurer or something. Okay, you get a badge, and the progress bar shows you're halfway across. All right, so they know where they are in the process, they know how they're doing, they're getting feedback, and it's all legal and subtle and fun. And this is exactly what you're going to have to do to make college recruiting a fun thing to do and to be successful. Build a face-to-face network on campus. You can leverage your people that are already on campus rather than going there. So use anybody that you know on campus to increase your power to drive people to your online networks. So use interns if you have interns. Use any professors that you know. Use other students that may be aware of you, that may have interviewed, and tell them, go spread the word about us. Go put the word out. If you do, you'll get another badge on your social network, or you'll get a reward for doing that. There doesn't have to be money. And you can do tons of stuff to drive people face to face to your network. Here are some strategies that you can use. If you really want to get a passive, innovative student over here, you're going to have to use very different methods than you're using today. What you've got today works really well for the traditional passive and active student, but you're probably not getting the people on the right-hand side of this equation. And I'll just leave this for you to peruse if you want to, and thinking about what you're doing in terms of different approaches to engaging these young people in your college strategy. So focus information, be precise. Candidates are always telling me there's nothing useful on the website. It's a bunch of boilerplate crap. Every single college recruiting site I go to tells me exactly the same thing. We're a wonderful place. We do great stuff. We walk on water. We invent beautiful things. We help the world. We're green. And they say, Dad, you're all the same. What the hell is different? So differentiate yourselves. You've got to be that way. They use all kinds of filters to judge you. They go out from Glassdoor to whatever else. They're figuring out what people are saying about you, what employees are saying about you. They probably know more about your company's reputation than you do. And so whatever you're telling them, you better be darn sure it resonates. And you can say, yeah, we're not very good at this, but we're trying to get better, and people like you could help us. Far better than to try to gloss over it and just say, no, we're really good at that. Get rid of all the fluff, the bureaucracy, be authentic, be real. I can't stress this enough. They have the best bullshit meters in the world. They've been brought up on television. They've been brought up on all the media. They're so good at this stuff, you cannot fool them. And so don't try. Just be really open and honest. This is what we are. This is the kind of environment we have. If you like it, then we're interested in you. If you don't, thanks, and we'll see you around. It's okay, right? And you got to go where they are. They're not going to come to you. They don't care about you. So you're going to have to go to them. And you're going to have to reach out like the Army's done and so many other groups to where they are and get them engaged in what you're doing. You might give a 1-year satisfaction guarantee. If you're not satisfied with our company after a year, we'll help you find another job. We'll give you a year's pay. Whatever. These are way out ideas, but these will work with this generation. What's something off the wall that you could do that they could say, God, how can I lose? I come here for a year, and I'm going to get, if I don't like it, all I got to do is say I don't like it, and I'm going to get my money back, basically. I'm going to get my year back. I'm going to get something back for that, okay? Let them transfer internally whenever they feel like it. And this is the hardest challenge, because I know I've sat there with hiring managers that say, darn it, I spent all this time and energy recruiting this person. They're damn well going to work for me for a year. You want to have a really unhappy, disgruntled employee for a year? Or would you rather have one who then walks out the door to a competitor? Or have somebody there that moves around but is really happy and engaged in your company? So you've really got to begin to influence and educate hiring managers as well. And this is the old traditional way. I think it's got to be buried. You've got to dig a big hole and put it all in the big hole and cover it up. It's gone and over. It worked for the 20th century. It will not work for the 21st. You're going to have to look at all these different tools. You have very little need for the infrastructure of the university itself. What you have is a huge need for a social networking strategy and a way to reach out to these students by yourself, from yourself, that differentiates you, not makes you part of the pack that's there recruiting, but is a different, off-the-wall, fun, exciting place to go work with really cool recruiters who know how to engage me and get me involved. And so that's kind of how you have to approach it. And I thank you very much. Yeah. I don't know if you have any questions or want to spend another few minutes. It's up to you guys. So, yeah.
Over here, actually. I got one from one of our virtual attendees who asks, how can employers gain buy-in for a college recruiting strategy that may not immediately show ROI, such as starting to engage in high school? And it's a long time before it pays off.
Yeah. Well, I think the only answer I have to you is exactly the same that your marketing people would give you for marketing a product or anything else in the company. You have to kind of lay the seeds down. You have to build the interest in that, just like you do in many products and services. They don't immediately pay off. It pays off 2 to 3 years down the road. So you put money into product development as an investment in the future. You try 2 or 3 different things. You know that some of them will work, some won't. But I think we in HR just can't say everything we do is going to be incredibly successful and have a high ROI. You have to, again, be honest and say, look, I'm pretty sure, given all this business case that I'm going to lay out, that this is the approach we need to take. There's a couple of experiments that I'd like to try this year and see if they work. We may not know for 2 to 3 years how they're going to pay off, but let's start experimenting and giving this a shot. And I've never heard a hiring manager or a CFO who says, you can't do it if you present it in a logical, reasonable business plan. They don't say no. Everybody knows they have to invest in R&D. This is the R&D around people. And there's no payoff in R&D right off the bat.
Hi, you mentioned... Hi, my name is Michelle Robinson from Stexo. You mentioned games and contests, and I'm curious to know if you could give us some specific companies that could assist us in creating those games and contests, because that's not something that I'm really well versed in.
Yeah. I don't know of any company that focuses on games for recruiting per se. Mm-hmm. I think any of the gaming companies will do that for you. There are companies that do simulations for recruiting. Okay. And like Shaker Consulting in Cleveland do them for Starbucks and a lot of other companies, and they're very good. I just mentioned them not because I'm endorsing them. That's the only one I know of. Right. So, but I'm sure there's probably others out there who also do the simulations and so forth in video that are very, very well done.
And cost effective as well.
And very, very cost effective, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any others? Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it.